I stood alone in the town square clutching a faded photo of my son. Behind me, cruel voices jeered, "Your boy's dead, now you're next." No one helped. No one cared. Only the bullies smiled. My name is Rosa Martinez. I'm 53 years old, and a year ago, I buried my only child. Since then, life has been a relentless fight, just to stay standing. I work as a seamstress in this small city, where everyone knows everyone, but no one dares to help when it truly matters. My son Luis was an extraordinary young man. I don't say that just because I'm his mother. Anyone in this neighborhood would tell you the same. Always lending a hand at the church, helping at the shelter, volunteering wherever he could. His smile could light up the darkest room. If someone was in trouble, Luis was there. The day of the fire. I see it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The old apartment building downtown was engulfed in flames. People were screaming, running. Without hesitation, Luis ran in and pulled 6 people out one by one. I watched it all. I screamed for him not to go back in. But he did, and he never came back out. They held a small ceremony for him, a few flowers, a hollow speech. After that, silence. And then my true nightmare began. Bruno Salgado. Just hearing his name makes my skin crawl. A thug who always seemed untouchable. Years ago, Luis had exposed one of Bruno's drug labs. The police raided it, but it wasn't enough to put him away for good. And when Luis was gone, Bruno saw his chance. It started with silent phone calls, then anonymous messages. One morning, I found the tires of my car slashed. Each night, unmarked cars would park outside my house. My neighbors avoided me. They were terrified. And I was alone. Sleep became impossible. I buried myself in my work sewing from dawn until well past midnight just to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how hard I tried, fear crept in through every crack. Every shadow, every sound kept me on edge. Then came that night. It was late. I had stayed at the shop to finish an urgent order. The streets were empty when I drove home. A cold drizzle fell from the sky. When I pulled up in front of my house, I froze. There, in dripping red paint across my door, were the words, "Rat's mother." I stood there paralyzed. My heart pounded in my chest. Slowly, I walked closer, rain soaking through my clothes. I reached out and touched the words, "Rat." Mother of a rat. That's what they were calling my son. My Luis, who had given his life to save others. A hot wave of rage surged through me. Tears spilled down my face, not from fear, but from fury. I stood in that rain-soaked street, clutching Luis's photo to my chest. In my mind, I heard his voice, "Don't let them win, Mama. Don't give up." And I knew then, I couldn't keep hiding. Bruno thought he could crush me, that I was just some lonely old seamstress, but he didn't know what a mother with nothing left to lose was capable of. I went inside, locked the door, sat down at my sewing machine and switched on the light. The rain beat against the windows like war drums. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't sit and wait. I wouldn't be their next victim. For Luis, for my dignity, I would fight back. As the clock struck 3 a.m., I grabbed a scrap of paper and wrote 3 words: "I won't surrender." I taped it next to Luis's photo. Because this story is far from over. I couldn't sleep that night. The rain had stopped, but in my mind a storm kept raging. I sat in the kitchen staring at Luis's photo. His eyes, so full of life, seemed to look right through me. "I won't surrender," I whispered again. I had no idea how, but I meant it. The next morning, I forced myself to go to the market. I needed groceries, and I refused to let fear chain me inside. I wore my thickest coat, and pulled the scarf tight around my neck. As I stepped outside, I glanced at the door rat's mother was still there glaring back at me. I'd scrubbed at it until my fingers bled, but the paint had seeped into the wood. It would take more than soap and water to erase that. I kept my head high as I walked through the streets. Every step felt heavier than the last. People glanced at me and looked away. A few whispered behind their hands. I'd become the town's ghost, someone they pitied but wouldn't dare approach. The market was busy, as always, filled with chatter and the smell of fresh bread. I gripped my shopping basket and moved quickly through the aisles. That's when I heard it, low voices too close. "She looks tired. Maybe we should help her sleep," one voice hissed. Another chuckled darkly. "Rat's mother. Shouldn't even be out here." I froze. Slowly, I turned my head. 2 of Bruno's men stood near the fruit stand, grinning at me. They were young, no older than Luis had been. One had a scar across his cheek. The other kept twirling a coin between his fingers. I clenched my basket tighter and forced myself to keep moving. Their footsteps followed me. At the register, one of them brushed past, leaning in so close I could feel his breath. "Next time, Senora, you might not be so lucky." My hands shook as I paid the cashier, who avoided my gaze. No one said a word. No one stopped them. I rushed home, heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I locked the door behind me, the tears came. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because I was angry. Angry at them, angry at the town, angry at myself for letting them get to me. I made tea to calm my nerves and tried to focus on my sewing, but my fingers wouldn't stop trembling. I kept replaying their words, their smiles, that look in their eyes, like they already owned me. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind made me jump. Around 2 a.m, I heard a sharp crack, glass shattering. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the living room. The front window was broken shards glittering on the floor. My breath caught in my throat when I saw what they had left on the porch. A small doll, its face burned and blackened, lay twisted on the wooden boards. Its charred dress was smeared with red paint. Another message. I opened the door with shaking hands and picked it up. The smell of smoke still clung to it. My stomach turned. That was meant to be me. I sat down at the kitchen table, doll in hand, staring at the broken window. This wasn't just about scaring me anymore. This was about breaking me. But as I looked at that doll, something shifted inside me. I thought about Luis, about everything he had stood for. He hadn't backed down from Bruno, and neither would I. I placed the burned doll on the shelf next to the photo of Luis. It would stay there as a reminder, not of fear, but of why I had to fight. When dawn came, I picked up the phone. I knew who to call. Not the police, they were useless. No, there was someone else. "Maria, it's Rosa," I said, my voice steady. Maria was one of the few friends I had left a retired journalist, with no love for thugs like Bruno. "I need your help. It's time someone told the truth. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning." The next morning, after calling Maria, I forced myself to act. I couldn't keep going on like this, waiting for the next window to shatter or the next threat to appear on my doorstep. I needed help. My first thought was the neighbors. Many of them had known Luis since he was a boy. He'd fixed their leaky faucets, carried their groceries, even shoveled their walkways after snowstorms. Surely some would remember and stand with me now. I started with Senora Lopez, who lived just across the street. I'd known her for 20 years. Luis used to mow her lawn in the summers. When I knocked on her door, I heard footsteps inside, hesitant pausing. Finally, the door cracked open. Her face peeked through eyes wide and wary. "Rosa," she whispered, glancing behind me nervously. "I need your help," I said softly, trying not to sound desperate. "They broke my window last night. They left. A doll. I can't do this alone. I need people to stand with me." She bit her lip, looking down at the floor. "Rosa, please. You know I loved Luis. We all did." But Bruno, her voice broke off. She looked around again as if someone might be watching. "We can't cross him. We're sorry." Before I could say another word, she shut the door. I stood there for a moment, the cold seeping into my bones. I moved on door to door. Same story. Some didn't open at all. Others barely cracked the door to murmur the same refrain. "We're sorry. We can't." I wasn't angry at them. I understood the fear. But knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. As I walked back toward my house, shoulders slumped, I heard whispers behind me. "She should just leave town. She's bringing trouble on herself. Poor woman. She doesn't know who she's dealing with." I kept walking head high, but inside I was unraveling. The town I had lived in my entire life, the people who had once embraced me after Luis's funeral, now looked at me like I was a ghost, or worse, a curse. In the afternoon, I went to the church. It had always been my sanctuary. Luis and I used to sit in the second pew every Sunday. Father Miguel had baptized him. Surely here I would find allies. I waited after Mass and approached him in the vestry. His face lit up at first, then darkened when I told him why I had come. "Father, they're trying to scare me. They broke my window. They left a burned doll. I need support from the church, from the community." He sighed heavily, folding his hands. "Rosa, I admire your courage, truly. But we must think of the congregation if we take sides. If Bruno retaliates." He shook his head. "I'm sorry. We must remain neutral. We will pray for you. Pray for me." That was all he had to offer. I walked out of the church feeling more alone than ever. Even God's house seemed to shrink away from me now. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. Maria hadn't called back yet. The shadows in the room felt heavier than usual. I thought of Luis. How many times had he told me, "Mama, this town's worth fighting for"? But sometimes, you have to fight alone first. He had been right. I was alone now. But that didn't mean I was finished. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and grabbed a notebook. If no one would stand with me, I'd make my own stand. I began writing everything down, every threat, every incident, every word I'd heard whispered in the market. They wanted me to be silent. They wanted me broken, but as long as I had breath in my body, I would not give them that satisfaction. Not for myself, not for Luis. The next blow came faster than I'd expected. I was in the middle of stitching a delicate hem when there was a knock at the door. Not loud, timid, almost apologetic. I opened it to find Mr. Ortega, my landlord, standing there. His hat was clutched tightly in his hands, eyes darting everywhere but my face. "Senora Rosa," he began, voice low. This isn't easy for me. I've always respected you and your son. But..." He paused, swallowing hard. "But what, Mr. Ortega?" I asked, already dreading the answer. He shifted from foot to foot. "There's been talk. Bruno's people. They've made it clear that trouble is coming. I can't afford it. I have my own family to think about. I'm sorry, but you need to leave by the end of the month." For a moment the words didn't register. I stared at him, the needle still in my hand. "You're evicting me." My voice was barely a whisper. He winced. "It's not personal, Rosa. You understand. If they burn this building, or worse." I closed the door before he could finish. I didn't want to hear the rest. I sat back down at my sewing machine, the fabric in front of me blurring as tears welled up. I had lived in this apartment for 15 years. Luis had taken his first steps in that living room. We had celebrated every birthday, every Christmas here. Now I was being pushed out like garbage. I wiped my eyes and forced myself to keep sewing. I still had orders to finish. Clients who depended on me, or so I thought. Later that day, I checked my messages. That's when I noticed the cancellations. First one, then another, and another. "So sorry, Rosa, but I won't be needing the dress after all. My husband thinks it's best if we take our business elsewhere for now. Nothing personal. You understand, right?" The words blurred together. My hands trembled as I read message after message. It was clear. Bruno had started spreading lies, whispering poison through the streets. They said I had brought Luis's death upon myself, that he had crossed the wrong people because of me, that I was cursed. Word travels fast in a small town. Faster when it's venom. By evening, nearly every order had been canceled. My income gone. The sewing machine, my one lifeline, now sat silent. I stared at it, heart-pounding. Fear clawed at me, not just for my safety anymore, but for my survival. If I couldn't pay rent, couldn't buy food, where would I go? I thought of Luis again. How hard he had worked to help me build this small life. How proud he had been of every dress I made, every customer who smiled and said thank you. Now, they were gone. One by one, turning their backs on me. I spent that night pacing the apartment. The shadows on the walls seemed to close in mocking me. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant engine outside, made my stomach twist. At one point, I opened the drawer where I kept Luis's old wallet. Inside was a folded note he had written long ago. "No matter how dark it gets, Mama, you keep going. Promise me." I pressed the note to my chest. "I promise," I whispered. "I don't know how yet, but I will." The fight was harder than I'd imagined. Now it wasn't just about fear. It was about losing everything Luis and I had built. But they hadn't taken my will. Not yet. I sat down, pulled out my notebook again, and kept writing. If no one would stand with me, then at least there would be a record of truth that couldn't be erased. I wasn't done. They had no idea how much fight was left in me. By the next morning, I had reached a breaking point. Sleep had been impossible. I kept seeing the burned doll, the broken window, the sneers at the market. I thought of the canceled orders, the eviction notice, that now sat on my kitchen table, like a death sentence. And worst of all, the silenced neighbors who had once shared meals with me now avoided my eyes. The church that had cradled us in grief now stood cold and distant. I couldn't let it go on like this. I had no choice but to try the police. Even if deep down, I didn't expect much. I dialed the precinct number with shaking fingers. After 3 rings, a tired voice answered. "Police station." I cleared my throat. "This is Rosa Martinez. Bruno Salgado's men are threatening me. They broke my window. They left a burned doll on my porch. I need help." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Look, Señora Martinez," the officer said, voice low and clipped. "We've heard things, but unless you have witnesses, hard evidence, there's no case. No one's willing to testify, and you know how it works." My chest tightened. "But they're terrorizing me." I'm scared for my life. Another sigh. I'm going to be straight with you. Be smart, move away, get out while you can. This isn't a fight you can win here. I bit my lip to keep from sobbing. So that's it, you're telling me to run, Rosa, the officer said, and for a moment his tone softened. I'm telling you to survive. The line went dead. I sat there, phone clutched in my hand, cold creeping through my bones. Even the law had washed its hands of me. For a while, I just sat in silence. Part of me wanted to give in, to pack a suitcase and disappear. But then I looked at Luis's photo again, his smile so full of hope and stubborn light. And the anger flared again, fiercer this time. I wouldn't vanish. I wouldn't let Bruno win. If the town wouldn't hear me, if the police wouldn't protect me, then I'd find someone who would. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper in front of me. The words came slowly at first, then in a flood. To the editor. My name is Rosa Martinez. I am the mother of Luis Martinez, the young man who gave his life saving 6 people during the apartment fire last year. The same young man this city briefly honored then forgot. Now, I am being harassed by Bruno Salgado and his men. They have vandalized my home, destroyed my business, and turned the town against me through lies and fear. I have asked for help. The police told me to leave. My neighbors look away. I am alone. I am writing this not because I seek pity. I seek justice. I seek truth. My son stood against these men when no one else dared. He paid for it with his life. I will not dishonor his memory by running. If there is anyone left in this city who believes in justice, who remembers what Luis did, please stand with me. Do not let them bury us twice. With hope, Rosa Martinez. When I finished, my hands were trembling. I read the letter over and over, tears falling freely, now not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what I was about to do. I sealed the envelope and addressed it to the local newspaper. Then I sat back and stared at the dark window, heart pounding. Would anyone listen? I didn't know, but I had to try. For Luis, for myself, for anyone else who might face Bruno next. I left the letter on the table, ready to mail first thing in the morning. Outside the town lay quiet. Too quiet. But for the first time in days, I felt a spark of something I hadn't dared hope for. A fight. A chance. This wasn't over yet. The next morning, I walked to the post office under a pale gray sky. Each step felt like an act of defiance. I could almost feel eyes watching me from behind curtains, but I kept my chin high. At the counter, I handed over the envelope with shaking hands. To the editor, I told the clerk. She glanced at the name, her mouth tightening, but said nothing. I walked home with a strange mix of dread and relief. I'd done what I could. Now all I could do was wait. The day passed in silence. No clients came. No friends called. Even Maria hadn't returned my messages. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, Luis's photo beside me. I wondered what he would say, if he could see me now. Probably something stubborn and brave. You can do this, Mama. I went to bed with that thought. 2 mornings later, the knock at my door startled me. It was early, too early for a delivery. I pulled on a shawl and answered cautiously. A young woman stood there holding a notepad and a camera bag slung over her shoulder. Her hair was dark and pulled back, her eyes sharp and determined. "Señora Martinez," she asked. I nodded. "Elena Reyes. I'm a reporter with the Tribuna del Pueblo. I read your letter." My heart leapt. "You did?" She smiled softly. "I want to help. May I come in?" I hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. She followed me into the kitchen and sat across from me at the table. "I showed your letter to my editor," Elena began. Most wanted to ignore it, afraid of stirring trouble. But I couldn't. Your son was a hero, and what's happening to you is wrong. Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. Elena pulled out her recorder. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." For the next hour, I poured out the whole story. The harassment, the neighbor's silence, the church's withdrawal, the police warning me to leave. Elena listened intently, taking notes, her jaw tightening with every new detail. When I finished, she placed a comforting hand on mine. "I'm going to write this, Rosa. People need to know. And we'll publish it online too, where they can't ignore it." I watched her leave with cautious hope blooming in my chest. For the first time in weeks, someone believed me. Someone was willing to speak up. That evening, I sat by the window sewing to calm my nerves. Just before sunset, my phone buzzed. It was Maria. "Have you seen the article?" I rushed to my old laptop, hands trembling. There it was. Front page of the Tribuna's website. "Mother of fallen hero. Bullied by thugs." By Elena Reyes. It told everything: the fire, Luis's sacrifice, the campaign of terror against me, the police indifference, the community's fear. Elena had written with such raw honesty, it brought tears to my eyes. She had even included a photo of Luis in his volunteer uniform, smiling as always. At first, I feared the reaction. But within hours, comments flooded in. Messages of support from strangers, calls for justice. Then something incredible happened. Veterans groups began sharing the story. Men and women who understood sacrifice and honor. Activists reposted it, demanding action. By nightfall, my inbox overflowed with messages from concerned citizens, offering help, legal advice, donations, even offers to accompany me around town. The town's silence had been broken. I sat there stunned, reading message after message. Luis's name was no longer just a memory whispered in my empty rooms. It was out in the world again, shining brighter than Bruno's darkness. I looked at his photo and smiled through my tears. "We're not alone anymore, mijo," I whispered. "We've got an army now." I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, I dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, justice was within reach. The days after the article published were unlike anything I'd known. Messages poured in from across the country. Veterans posted photos of their own service medals in solidarity with Luis. Activists organized a march in front of City Hall. Strangers offered everything from free legal help to groceries. For the first time in months, I wasn't completely alone, but with support came risk. Bruno wasn't the type to retreat quietly. Maria called me one evening. "Rosa, this is dangerous. You could leave for a while just until things calm down." I shook my head. I promised Luis I wouldn't run. If I leave now, they win. Elena agreed. "Stand your ground, Senora. The eyes of the country are on you now." Her words strengthened my resolve. The fear was still there, yes, but beneath it something fiercer had taken root. Anger, defiance. I refused to be chased from my home. A week after the article went live, Elena called again. "We've heard chatter that Bruno's gang is planning something. I want to be ready. I've arranged for some trusted friends to record if anything happens. Stay strong." I hung up, heart racing. The next morning I dressed carefully. Plain slacks, a neat blouse, Luis's medal pinned over my heart. I was going to the market not because I needed food, but because I refused to hide. As I walked through the streets, I noticed more eyes on me. some filled with shame, others with cautious respect. A few nodded. The tide was shifting. But Bruno wasn't finished. I had just picked up a loaf of bread when I heard the voices loud sneering. "Well, look who's playing the hero's mother again." One of Bruno's thugs spat. I recognized him, Miguel, the one with the scar. 2 others flanked him, blocking the path. The crowd around us parted silent. No one moved to help. Miguel stepped closer, so close I could see the hate in his eyes. "Thought you'd bring your circus here. Thought a few online fans could save you." He leaned in. "We run this town, not you. You leave, or next time, it won't be your window." I clenched my fist to stop them from trembling. I wanted to scream, to cry, but Luis's voice rang in my mind. "Stand tall, Mama." "I'm not leaving," I said, voice steady. "You can threaten me all you want. The whole country knows now, and they're watching." Miguel laughed. "You think that matters out here? No one's coming to save you." But this time, he was wrong. I caught a flicker of movement behind him. Elena's friend, a young man with a camera tucked discreetly under his jacket, was filming. The confrontation lasted only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When Miguel shoved my shoulder roughly, I stumbled but didn't fall. I stood straight again, staring him down. "You should be the one who's afraid," I said quietly. Miguel hesitated. Maybe he sensed something was different now. After a tense beat, he spat on the ground and turned away. His men followed. The crowd remained frozen as I straightened my blouse and picked up my bread. I walked out of that market with my head high. An hour later, Elena called, breathless with excitement. "We got it all on video. It's already online. It's spreading fast." By nightfall, the footage had gone viral. National news outlets picked it up. The headline read, "Mother of Fallen Hero. Publicly Threatened. Where is Justice? Social media exploded. Politicians tweeted support. Activist groups planned rallies. Donations flooded in for legal aid." And Bruno. For the first time, he was the one being hunted by public outrage, by national scrutiny. I sat at my kitchen table that night, watching it all unfold, Luis's metal warm against my chest. "We did it, mijo," I whispered. "We're fighting back, and this time the world is watching." The days that followed the viral video were a whirlwind. I barely slept glued to my small TV and ancient laptop as news outlets ran the story again and again. The pressure on the city mounted fast. National leaders began calling out the local authorities. How can this happen in our towns? One anchor asked, her voice tight with outrage. I could hardly believe it. My quiet fight had become a cause that gripped the country. Then early one morning came the knock I never thought I'd hear. When I opened the door, 2 officers from a special police unit stood there. State investigators, not our local ones. The older one, a tall woman with a crisp uniform and kind eyes, introduced herself. "Senora Martinez. I'm Lieutenant Rivera. We're here to formally investigate Bruno Salgado and his gang. We've seen the footage. We won't let this stand." I nodded, overwhelmed. My voice caught, but I managed to whisper, "Thank you." The investigation moved swiftly. Witnesses who had once been too afraid started speaking up, emboldened by public support. Veterans groups and activists kept the spotlight shining, refusing to let the city bury the story again. Within 2 weeks, arrest warrants were issued. The morning news showed footage of Bruno being led away in handcuffs, his arrogant smirk finally gone. Several key members of his gang were detained and charged with harassment, intimidation, and conspiracy. I watched from my kitchen table, tears streaming freely now.
"We did it, mijo," I whispered to Luis's photo. "They're finally going to pay." But the surprises weren't over. A few days later, a car pulled up in front of my building.
The mayor herself and the police chief came to my door. When I opened it, they both looked ashamed. "Senora Martinez," the mayor began, "we've failed. You failed to protect you when you needed us most. On behalf of the city, I offer my deepest apologies." The police chief, a stern man with silver at his temples, added, "We should have acted sooner. That changes now. Bruno's reign of terror ends here." For a moment, I simply stared. Then I nodded. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I hope this means no one else will have to go through what I did." The apology was only the beginning. The city soon announced a public ceremony to properly honor Luis. The event was held at the town square, the same place where I'd once stood alone clutching his photo while bullies laughed. This time, it was different. The square was packed with people, neighbors, activists, veterans, even officials. A stage had been set up with flowers and banners. At the center, a large portrait of Luis smiled down on us all. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the podium, my heart pounding. But as I looked out at the crowd, at the faces filled with hope and remorse, strength filled me. "My son died saving lives," I began, voice clear and steady. "He ran into a burning building because he believed every life mattered. He stood against fear, against cruelty. And because of that, he was targeted even after death." I paused, my gaze sweeping the crowd. "I will not live in fear anymore. And neither should anyone. This is our city. We must protect each other. Stand together. Speak out." The applause that followed was thunderous. I glanced up at Luis's portrait, blinking through tears. After the ceremony, more good news came. A local charity, moved by my story, offered to help me relocate to a safer home and fund my sewing business. For the first time in what felt like forever, I dared to plan for the future. Then came the final, most beautiful surprise. The city council voted unanimously to name a new community center after Luis Centro Comunitario Luis Martinez. At the grand opening, I stood beneath a mural of Luis, painted tall in strong arms, outstretched, as if embracing the children playing beneath. I smiled through tears, the laughter of children ringing in my ears. "You saved them once, my son," I whispered. "Now your courage will keep saving lives." And in that moment, I knew we had won. In this powerful, true-to-life story, Rosa Martinez, a humble seamstress and grieving mother, faces unthinkable harassment after her son Luis dies a hero, saving 6 lives from a burning building. But when a local gang led by the ruthless Bruno Salgado seeks revenge, Rosa's world crumbles. Neighbors turn away. The church remains silent, and the police urge her to leave town. Refusing to surrender, Rosa bravely exposes her plight through a heartfelt letter. With the help of journalist Elena Reyes, her story goes viral, sparking national outrage. Under mounting pressure, authorities finally act Bruno, and his gang are arrested, and Rosa is honored for her courage. Her son's legacy lives on as a new community center bears his name. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel for more inspiring true life stories of justice and resilience. Let's keep these voices heard.